Most people think communication is about speaking well. But the truth is, it's not. You can talk a lot and still be invisible. You can explain perfectly and still be ignored. You can be right and still lose. Because communication is not about words. It's about psychology. It's about power. It's about presence. If words were enough, the smartest people would be the most influential people. But look around you. That is not the world we live in. The world doesn't listen to the one who knows the most. It listens to the one who controls the room. You've seen it happen. Some people walk into a meeting, say just a few sentences, and everyone pays attention. Meanwhile, someone else talks for 20 minutes, and nobody remembers a thing they said. The difference is not intelligence. It's not talent. It's communication mastery. In the next 60 minutes, you will learn the psychology behind powerful communication, how influence is built, how respect is triggered, and how people decide whether to listen to you within the first 3 seconds. You will learn why silence is often more powerful than speaking, why confidence starts before your first word, why some people say less but influence more. This is not about talking louder. This is about talking smarter. And once you understand the rules beneath the surface, you'll never communicate the same way again. Take a breath, focus, and prepare to upgrade the way you speak, the way you think, and the way people respond to you. We all know someone like this, a person who is brilliant, well-educated, full of knowledge, yet every time they speak, their ideas go unnoticed. They explain carefully. They choose the right words. But somehow, no one seems to care. And then there's another kind of person, not the smartest in the room, not the one with the highest degree, maybe not even the one with the best idea. But when they speak, people stop. They listen. They follow. That difference between being heard and being ignored is the foundation of this entire audiobook. Because the biggest misconception about communication is this: people think communication is about sharing information. It's not. It's about shaping perception. Smart people fail at communication for one simple reason: they think being right is enough. They assume that if the idea is logical, others will automatically understand, agree, and follow. But human beings don't work like calculators. They work like emotional, social, tribal creatures. You don't win attention by being correct. You win attention by being compelling. And here is the quiet tragedy. Many intelligent people don't lack ideas, they lack influence. They enter conversations like thinkers, not leaders. They focus on accuracy, not authority. They speak to inform, not to impact. So let's break down why this happens. Reason 1. Smart people overestimate logic, underestimate psychology. They believe that the brain is a thinking machine. It isn't. The brain is a survival machine. It scans for threat, status, tone, energy, intention before it processes, meaning that means people don't listen to what you say first. They listen to who they think you are. Confidence, tone, posture, and presence are processed before content. So when a smart person starts talking with no frame, no emocional signal, no authority in posture or voice, their words fall flat, no matter how brilliant they are. Reason 2. Smart people explain too much. They think communication equals information, so they overload the listener. Facts, context, details, data, more data, even more data. But the brain doesn't reward information dumping. It punishes it. Too much information triggers cognitive fatigue. When the brain is overwhelmed, it disconnects. That's why many experts sound boring. They are not boring. They are unstructured. Influence is not about how much you know. It's about how well you guide attention. Reason 3. Smart people wait instead of leading. They enter a conversation passively. They wait for the right moment. They wait for permission. They wait to be asked. But in communication, waiting equals invisibility. People don't follow the quiet genius in the corner. They follow the one who claims the frame. Leadership in communication is not about dominating. It's about setting the direction of the conversation. If you don't take the lead, someone else will, even if they're less skilled, less informed, and less qualified. Reason 4. Smart people are afraid of being disliked. They want to be accurate and liked and polite and agreeable. But communication is not a popularity contest. It's a clarity contest. Your job is not to be liked. Your job is to be understood and respected. Trying to please everyone makes your message weak. A message that offends no one rarely influences anyone. Reason 5. Smart people speak from the mind, not from the body. They think communication is a mental activity, but influence is embodied. It's in your breath, your stillness, your eyes, your pauses, your certainty, your energy. The body speaks before the mouth does, and the world listens. Now, here's the deeper truth. Smart people don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they were never taught the psychology of attention. School teaches you what to think. Life rewards you for how you communicate, what you think. And this is why many intelligent people end up working for less intelligent people, not because of unfairness, but because of invisible rules of communication they never learned. So if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, underestimated, not because you lack value, but because people don't recognize your value, this audiobook is your turning point. Because from this moment on, you are not learning how to talk better. You are learning how to weaponize communication, not with manipulation, not with fake confidence, but with psychological precision, speaking in a way that signals authority, structuring ideas so they stick, using silence the way others use noise, building presence that enters the room before your voice does. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming someone the world can no longer ignore. And if you're ready for that shift, before we talk about powerful communication, we need to talk about the silent killers of communication, the invisible habits that destroy your influence before your first sentence even leaves your mouth. Because most people don't fail while they're speaking. They fail before they speak. Not because they lack intelligence, but because their body, tone, energy, timing, or mindset already communicated weakness without them realizing it. These are the 7 fatal communication mistakes. Once you see them, you will start noticing them everywhere in the workplace, in relationships, in leadership, in politics, even in yourself. Mistake 1: reactive communication. This is the habit of waiting for others to speak first, waiting to be asked, waiting for permission to contribute. Reactive communicators don't set frames. They respond. They follow. They adapt to the energy of the room instead of shaping it. And the brain makes a simple judgment if you're not leading the conversation. You're not the person who matters most. Influence is not given to the one who waits. It's given to the one who claims the space. Mistake 2: information dumping. The belief that more explanation equals more persuasion. So they talk. and talk, and talk. They bury the listener in facts, data, details, history, context. But the human brain doesn't reward long explanations. It punishes them. Too much information equals cognitive overload. And when the brain is overwhelmed, it shuts down, not up. Great communicators don't explain everything. They direct attention to the one thing that matters. Mistake 3. Emotional leakage. This is when your inner insecurity leaks out through your voice, posture, or tone. You say the right words, but your body says, "I'm nervous." Your voice says, "Please agree with me." Your eyes say, "I need approval." Your energy says, "I'm not sure I belong here." And the mind of the listener doesn't need logic. It only needs a feeling something is off. You cannot hide your emotional state. You can only master it. Mistake 4. Mirror communication. This is when you unconsciously copy the energy of the room, instead of bringing your own. If the other person is passive, you become passive. If they're uncertain, you become uncertain. If they're sloppy, you lower your standards. That's not connection. That's self-erasure. People don't respect those who adapt too easily. They respect those who bring a stable identity into every interaction. Mistake 5. Defensive communication. Someone questions you. You explain. You justify. You over-clarify. You start proving instead of leading. Defensiveness is the behavior of someone who fears losing status. And the paradox is the moment you defend, your status drops. Powerful communicators don't explain to be accepted. They clarify to move forward. Mistake 6. Approval-seeking communication. This is the subtle addiction to being liked. Using softer words. Adding unnecessary maybe. I think. If that's okay. Laughing when you don't need to. Nodding even when you disagree. The problem isn't niceness. The problem is needing validation more than respect. A person who wants to be liked becomes predictable, and predictable people are not influential. Mistake 7. Unconscious communication. The most common mistake of all: speaking without strategy. No intention. No delivery design. No awareness of tone, timing, framing, status, or emotion. Just talking. That's like entering a negotiation without a plan, or walking into a battlefield without knowing there's a war happening. Every word either builds your authority or erodes it. There is no neutral communication. You're always either rising or shrinking in people's minds. Now here's the awakening moment. Almost everyone makes these mistakes. Not because they're weak, but because nobody ever taught them the psychology of presence. But once you see the pattern, you can break it. You can speak from intention, not accident. You can lead the room instead of reacting to it. You can hold silence instead of filling it with nervous noise. You can speak to shape minds, not just deliver information. And that's the shift from talker to communicator. From here forward, your goal is simple. Stop leaking power. Start signaling authority. Human beings like to believe we are rational, that we listen first, then evaluate, then decide. But the brain doesn't work in that order. Before it listens to your message, before it judges your intelligence, before it even processes the meaning of your words, your brain and the brain of the person in front of you is already making a decision about your status, your confidence, your credibility, your level of threat, your level of value. And it happens in 3 seconds or less, not because people are shallow, but because evolution required us to judge quickly, to detect danger, to spot leadership, to know who to trust and who to ignore. First impressions are not a social rule. They are a survival mechanism. The brain uses thin slicing. Psychologists call it thin slicing, the ability to make sweeping judgments from very small amounts of information in a fraction of a second. People don't see you. They see signals, your posture, your eye contact, your stillness or fidgeting, your vocal tone, your breathing, your level of presence. They don't hear your words. They feel your energy. And once the brain labels you confident or unsure, high status or low status, leader or follower, every word you say after that will be filtered through that label. If the brain decides you are someone to listen to, your ideas get upgraded. If the brain decides you are not important, your ideas get muted, even if they're brilliant. The content doesn't decide credibility. The container does. The 5 channels of instant judgment in the first 3 seconds. People read you through 5 fast channels. 1. Posture. Are you collapsed or aligned? 2. Movement. Are you rushed, fidgety, or controlled? 3. Eyes. Are you grounded or scanning for approval? 4. Voice tone. Is your sound steady or shaky? 5. Opening energy. Do you enter the interaction or apologize for existing in it? These 5 signals tell the brain one thing: is this person worth my cognitive energy? Because listening is expensive. The brain doesn't want to invest attention in someone who doesn't look like they can lead attention. The silent hierarchy of presence, influence doesn't start when you speak. It starts the moment you appear. Someone who walks into a room with slow, grounded movement signals certainty. Someone who stands tall with relaxed shoulders signals emotional control. Someone who pauses before speaking signals that they don't need to rush because they aren't seeking approval. Someone who opens with clarity instead of apology signals leadership. None of this is verbal. It's pre-verbal authority. And authority always arrives before the words do. The posture paradox. Most people don't realize this. Your body communicates first. Your mouth communicates second. If your body says, "I'm unsure," your words won't fix it. If your body says, "I'm grounded," your words don't need to work as hard. That's why many brilliant people talk a lot, because their body isn't doing any of the communication for them. But powerful communicators speak less, because their presence is already speaking. The voice is a status signal. Your voice is not just sound. It's a status broadcast. A slow, stable voice equals confidence. A fast, breathless voice equals nervousness. A rising tone at the end of sentences uptalk equals seeking approval. A downward, calm tone equals certainty. Your voice is either asking or declaring. The brain hears the difference instantly. The primacy effect. Whatever you do first controls how everything after it is interpreted. If you start weak, you must fight uphill to gain credibility. If you start strong, you don't just gain attention, you own the frame from the beginning. This is why the most influential speakers, leaders, and negotiators never start by explaining. They start by centering the room. So what's the real takeaway? You don't need to speak perfectly. You need to signal power correctly. Because the first 3 seconds are not about content. They're about positioning. If you fail in those seconds, you will spend the rest of the conversation trying to recover. If you win those seconds, you don't need to convince people their brain is already on your side. The greatest communicators are not just skilled with words. They are skilled with first seconds. And once you master that, everything you say after that lands with heavier gravity. And now that you understand why first impressions decide the game, the next question is, how do you command respect without aggression? How do you appear strong without appearing threatening? How do you project authority without becoming the loudest person in the room? That's where we go next. In every interaction, whether you notice it or not, a silent hierarchy is being formed. A hierarchy of attention, a hierarchy of importance, a hierarchy of who is worth listening to. And here's the mistake most people make. They think respect is earned by speaking more, explaining more, proving more, convincing more. But real authority does not come from force. It comes from presence. Some people speak softly, yet the room leans in. Others speak loudly, yet the room tunes out. So what separates the two? Not intelligence, not experience, not job title, but the psychology of authority. Authority is not something you demand. It is something people assign to you when your behavior signals power without aggression. The paradox of influence: weak communicators try to be respected. Strong communicators assume respect. The moment you try to prove that you are powerful, you are already broadcasting insecurity. Authority is quiet. Insecurity is loud. A person with true authority doesn't need to say, "Listen to me." They speak in a way that says, "Listening is the logical thing to do." The three types of communicators. There are only three positions in the authority spectrum. 1. The submissive communicator. They fold, they shrink, they speak softly, not out of calmness, but fear. They apologize for having opinions. They want to be liked more than they want to be respected. 2. The aggressive communicator. They push, they interrupt. They try to dominate conversation with volume and speed. On the surface, they look strong, but real power does not need to shout. 3. The authoritative communicator. Calm, grounded, certain, not trying to dominate, not trying to get approval, just fully inhabiting their space. Only the third type creates instant respect and long-term influence. The 4 pillars of the authority matrix. To command attention without force. You don't need dominance, you need balance. Pillar 1. Emotional stillness. People don't follow the smartest person. They follow the person who looks like they won't break under pressure. The calmest nervous system in the room becomes the strongest nervous system in the room. Pillar 2. Clarity of intention. When you speak with a clear objective, the listener feels it. When you speak just to fill silence, the listener feels that too. Power is not in the sentence. It's in the purpose behind the sentence. Pillar 3. Boundary signaling. A person without boundaries cannot have authority. A single interruption you allow can erase 10 minutes of confident speaking. Authority is not controlling others. Authority is controlling what you allow. Pillar 4. Ownership of space. Not physical space, but attention space. Some people talk into the room. Others talk from the center of it. Same words, different gravity. The stillness principle. If you study powerful leaders, negotiators, or even actors, you'll notice something: they move less. Stillness is not the absence of energy. It is the containment of energy. It tells the brain, I am not rushed. I am not nervous. I am not seeking permission. I am in control. Even animals understand stillness. The lion does not prove it is the lion. It simply takes its place, the voice of authority. People misunderstand vocal authority. It's not about having a deep voice. It's about having a settled voice. A voice that is not chasing approval. A voice that does not rush to finish. A voice that ends sentences with downward certainty, not upward uncertainty. The difference between right and this is what we're doing. The brain hears that difference instantly. How authority handles disagreement. The fastest way to measure someone's true power is to watch how they respond to resistance. Weak communicators get defensive. Aggressive communicators get louder. Authoritative communicators get calmer. They don't fight the emotion. They remove the emotional charge from the interaction. Power is not proven by winning an argument. Power is proven by not being emotionally dragged into one. Asterisk. Authority is not something you push onto people. It's something people give you when they feel your center. Asterisk. And they only give it to those who show three things. 1. You are not trying to impress them. 2. You are not threatened by them. 3. You are not dependent on their approval. When people sense those three qualities, they upgrade you automatically. Not because you demanded it, but because their instinct tells them this person doesn't need validation, which means they probably deserve it. A mindset shift from performer-selector. Most people enter a conversation asking unconsciously, will they like me? Will they accept me? Authority enters a conversation asking, do I want to engage? Is this worth my voice? That is not arrogance. That is sovereignty. People don't follow the one who wants to be chosen. They follow the one who chooses. Practical rule of authority. If you want to sound powerful, don't add more words. Add more weight to fewer words. Power is not in what you say. It's in what you don't need to say. Sometimes the strongest statement is a pause. Sometimes the most dominant response is a calm one. Sometimes the loudest message is silence. Now that you understand how authority silently shapes perception, let's explore the most misunderstood element of communication. Not speaking, not tone, not body language. Silence. Silence as a weapon. Silence as a strategy. Silence as a test of power. Silence is one of the most misunderstood tools in communication. People fear silence. They rush to fill it. They mistake silence for weakness, awkwardness, or lack of confidence. But in the hands of someone who understands psychology, silence becomes the opposite of weakness. Silence becomes control. Because here is the truth, most people never realize: words can fight. Silence can win. Why silence is powerful. The brain hates uncertainty. When silence appears, the mind starts working. It starts searching. It starts adjusting. Silence makes the other person think. It makes them reveal more. It makes them feel the weight of what has not been said. While noise pushes, silence pulls. When you pause after a statement, the pause becomes an amplifier. It tells the listener, I said something important. Now I'll let you feel it. The 4 types of strategic silence. There are 4 powerful ways silence can be used in communication. 1. The confidence pause. Silence before you speak. Most people rush into the first sentence. They start talking to avoid awkwardness. But the person who pauses before speaking sends a different signal. I am not in a hurry. I speak when I choose, not when I'm pressured. That pause alone creates presence. 2. The emphasis, pause, silence after the key point. Example, this is not just a mistake. This is a warning sign. Pause. The silence is the underline. 3. The revelation silence. Silence after asking a question. Weak communicators ask a question, then answer it for the other person. Strong communicators ask, and wait. And the other person feels the weight of that silence. They start talking more than they planned. They reveal more than they intended. Because silence creates psychological pressure to respond. 4. The boundary, silence. Silence, after being interrupted, challenged, or disrespected. Instead of reacting emotionally, you let silence do the work. You look, you breathe, you wait. Because silence says, I am not moving just because you want me to move. That is not passiveness. That is power held instead of power performed. A real dialogue example. Here's a simple comparison. Weak communicator well. I think what I'm trying to say is, maybe we could consider a different option. Unless you don't think it makes sense, power communicator, there's a better option than the one on the table. Pause. Do you want me to walk you through it? Same idea. Different structure, different weight, different psychological effect. The silence creates gravity. Silence in negotiation. In negotiation. The first person who breaks silence often loses leverage. Example, the proposal is $12. Ling, ling, ling. Silence. The other side begins explaining why they need a discount. They lose. The proposal is $12. Ling, ling, ling. Silence. The other side. Okay. Let's move forward. You win. Silence makes the other side feel the responsibility to respond. And the moment they respond, they reveal their position, their pressure, or their weakness. Silence in leadership. Great leaders don't answer every question immediately. They let silence create thoughtfulness. When a leader pauses, the room leans in. The message becomes heavier. The speaker becomes larger. When someone asks a difficult question and you breathe, wait, and return to eye contact, you are silently saying, I am not afraid of this moment. That is leadership communicated without a single extra word. Silence in conflict. Anger expects reaction. Silence breaks the script. When someone attacks you verbally and you don't react, you don't fight, defend, or apologize, the emotional energy collapses. Because silence forces the other person to sit with their behavior. Sometimes, the strongest argument is no argument. Silence as a mirror. Silence makes people reveal who they are. A confident person remains calm inside silence. An insecure person fills it with noise. An anxious person starts explaining. An overtalker begins justifying. When you hold silence, you are not just communicating, you are diagnosing. The rule of power, silence. The more comfortable you are with silence, the more powerful you appear. The more uncomfortable you are with silence, the more approval you subconsciously seek. The mind of the listener always scans who is leading the tempo. If you control the tempo, you control the room. So how do you train this? Start small. Pause 1 second before speaking. After a key sentence, laisse silence land. When asked a question, wait 2 seconds before answering. When challenged, don't rush to explain. Practice ending sentences and letting the room breathe. You will feel the silence first. Then the room will feel it. Then the room will respect it. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is compressed authority. Everything we've learned so far has been about holding the room. But what if the goal is not just to speak with authority, but to change someone's mind? Authority gives you respect. Influence gives you movement. That brings us to the next level of communication psychology: how to persuade without manipulation. How to change opinions without resistance. How to make people want what you want while thinking it was their idea. Persuasion is not what most people think it is. It's not about forcing someone to agree. It's not about winning arguments. It's not about out-talking the other person or proving that you're smarter. Real persuasion is invisible. It is quiet, subtle, and almost effortless. It works not by pushing people, but by aligning with them so that the decision feels natural, logical, and most importantly, self-chosen. Because the truth is simple, no one likes being persuaded, but everyone loves believing they made the right decision. That is the paradox of influence. The more you try to convince someone, the more they resist. But the moment they feel the decision is theirs, the resistance disappears. Human beings don't make decisions based on logic first. We decide emotionally, then justify logically. We don't choose the best option. We choose the option that feels safest, clearest, or most aligned with what we already want. So the real art of persuasion is not changing someone's mind. It is creating the environment in which their own mind moves with you. The amateur persuader starts with arguments. The master persuader starts with motive. Before trying to convince someone, they ask, what is the desire behind their decision? What are they trying to protect, avoid, or achieve? Because until you speak to someone's inner motive, every argument is noise. People don't move because of facts. They move because of identity, safety, ego, convenience, reward, and emotion. You don't convince a person by telling them why you want something. You convince them by articulating why they already want it. And once the emotional motive is activated, persuasion becomes simple. You are no longer trying to push them forward. You are guiding them towards something they already feel pulled toward. But there is something even more important than activating desire, removing resistance before it rises. Persuasion dies the moment the other person feels they are being cornered, pressured, or sold to. So instead of fighting objections, the skilled persuader dissolves them in advance. They name the objection before the listener even speaks it. They validate the fear instead of dismissing it. They show that there is no war to fight, no pressure to resist, no loss to fear. And the moment a person no longer needs to defend themselves, their mind stops bracing and starts listening. Then comes the most overlooked element of persuasion, reducing psychological cost. Most people don't say no because they disagree. They say no because the decision feels risky. Not always financially risky, sometimes emotionally, socially, or mentally risky. The brain is always scanning. What could go wrong if I say yes? So persuasion is not just about making the reward bigger. It's about making the risk feel smaller. That's why the most persuasive people don't ask for a huge leap. They offer a small step, a safe test, a réversible décision. Try this first. No commitment yet. If it doesn't work, we adjust. That is how the brain relaxes. That is how maybe becomes yes. And finally, there is one last psychological principle. People resist being controlled, but they comply when they feel they have a choice. So the skilled persuader doesn't say, here's what we're doing. They say, which version of this works best for you? Both paths lead where you intend. But the listener feels ownership. They don't feel pushed, they feel involved. That is why the best persuasion never sounds like persuasion. It sounds like clarity, safety, and autonomy. Let's see it in action. A weak persuader says, we need to switch systems. This current one is outdated and inefficient. Facts, pressure, and implied criticism. The other person's brain hears risk, disruption, uncertainty. A powerful persuader says, "You said you wanted the team to work without constant delays." Right. Instant. Motive alignment. Then, if I were you, I'd also be worried about changing too fast. Resistance neutralized before it forms. Then, here's the low-risk option. We run both systems in parallel for 10 days. No disruption. No commitment. If it isn't better, we drop it. Psychological cost reduced. And finally, we can start Monday or next sprint. Which timing gives you more control? Choice given. Ego protected. Resistance gone. Same idea. Different psychology. Different outcome. That is persuasion in its highest form, no force. No debate. No pushback. Just alignment. Safety. And forward motion. If there is one sentence that summarizes elite persuasion, it is this: you don't win by pushing harder. You win by removing every reason for no. When done right, persuasion feels like the other person made the decision. When done wrong, it feels like a battle. One builds influence, the other destroys it. Up to this point, we've learned how to speak with presence, signal authority, hold silence, and persuade with design instead of pressure. But there is one more layer of mastery: the ability to read people. Read power. Read the room and adjust without ever lowering your identity or energy. That is not just communication. That is social intelligence. Every conversation you enter already has an invisible structure, a social rhythm, a power balance, a level of emotional intensity, and an unspoken set of expectations. Most people walk into that structure unconsciously, react to whatever is happening, then wonder why they weren't heard, respected, or understood. But the most influential communicators don't just speak well. They read the environment first. They scan the room the same way a pilot scans the sky before takeoff. Because, in communication, what you say is never the first move. The first move is calibration. Social calibration is the ability to sense who holds the power here, what tone is acceptable, how fast or slow should I speak. Is this a space for logic, emotion, or authority? Is the listener defensive, open, skeptical, tired, or curious? Most people try to communicate with one version of themselves, the same tone everywhere, same speed, same style. But communication is not a speech. It is a dance. And a dancer doesn't fight the rhythm, they step into it, then lead from within it. And this is where many smart people fail. They think adapting means losing yourself or being fake. But real adaptation is not becoming someone else. It is choosing which part of yourself to activate for the situation. The same person can be calm in a crisis, sharp in a debate, soft in an intimate conversation, and direct in a negotiation, not because they are fake, but because they are multidimensional and self-aware. You don't change your identity. You adjust your delivery. Think of it like volume, not personality. The music is the same. You're just tuning it to the right room. Some rooms require presence. Some require clarity. Some require warmth. Some require authority. Some require silence. Communication does not reward the person who expresses the most. It rewards the person who speaks the language of the moment. Let's make this real. Imagine you walk into a meeting with executives. They don't want your passion. They want precision. Short sentences. No extra words. No emotional flooding. They listen at the speed of results. Then imagine you're talking to a friend who's emotionally hurt. They don't need your logic. They don't need your solutions. They need your presence and your listening energy. Différent, different calibration. Same you, just a smarter version. Or imagine speaking to a new team for the first time. If you walk in trying to be likable, you drop in status. If you walk in trying to be dominant, you create distance. But if you walk in calm, measured, grounded, and observant, you earn authority without saying much. Why? Because calibration signals intelligence beyond words. People don't trust the one who talks the most. They trust the one who understands the room. In every group, there are 3 layers you must read before speaking. 1. Power dynamics, who has real influence, not just the title. 2. Emotional climate, is this a calm space or a tense one? 3. Unspoken rules, what is acceptable here and what is not? If you ignore these, you don't just communicate, you misfire. You can be right and still be dismissed. You can be smart and still be seen as awkward. You can have the best idea and still lose to someone with a worse one, simply because they matched the room before they led it. Calibration is not weakness. Calibration is positioning. And once positioned, you can influence the structure instead of reacting to it. But here is the danger: many people calibrate by shrinking. They over-adapt. They disappear. They bend so much they lose shape. That is not calibration. That is self-erasure. True calibration doesn't say, "I'll become whatever you want." It says, "I will enter the room on your frequency, but I will speak from my identity." You adjust the surface, not the core. Like a skilled speaker who starts softly, builds connection, then shifts the room with clarity and force. Like a negotiator who listens first, reads leverage, then anchors the frame. Like a leader who doesn't enter with dominance, but earns it by composure. People don't follow the loudest person. They follow the one who seems to understand the moment better than anyone else. That's why calibration is not manipulation. It is respect. Respect for context, for psychology, for timing. And once you master calibration, persuasion becomes effortless. Because the listener feels, this person gets me. This person gets the situation. This person isn't fighting the room. They are in command of it. From there, your message doesn't feel intrusive. It feels aligned. And when communication is aligned, your words don't need force. They travel on trust. We are now entering the highest layers of communication psychology. The ability not just to speak well, but to shape reality inside the mind of others. And that requires one more level of mastery. Confidence that doesn't depend on approval, outcomes, or external validation. A confidence constructed from the inside out. Because if you calibrate without inner stability, you adapt into weakness. But if you calibrate with inner stability, you adapt into power. Confidence is not what most people think it is. It is not loudness. It is not ego. It is not walking into a room and assuming everyone should admire you. True confidence is much quieter. It is the kind of certainty that doesn't need to announce itself. A calm knowing, a grounded presence, a voice and a posture that say, "Without words, I can handle whatever happens here." Most people chase confidence the wrong way. They think confidence comes from compliments, success, titles, praise, or external validation. So when those things disappear, their confidence collapses with them. They live in a cycle where they only feel strong when the world agrees with them. But real confidence does not come from the outside in. It comes from the inside out. It is not built on how others see you, but on what you know about yourself. And once that internal structure is built, no rejection, no doubt, no interruption, no criticism can shake it. The foundation of that kind of confidence is simple. You do not believe in yourself because you are always right. You believe in yourself because you know you can handle being wrong. You do not trust yourself because you never fail. You trust yourself because you know failure does not destroy you. You do not feel powerful because life is easy. You feel powerful because you know you remain steady even when life is not. Confidence is not the absence of fear. Confidence is the relationship you have with fear. So the question is not, how do I stop being afraid? The real question is, when fear appears, what does my identity do? Weak confidence collapses. Borrowed confidence hides. Ego confidence attacks. Real confidence breathes, observes, and acts with clarity. People think confidence is an emotion. It's not. Confidence is a memory system. A record of moments where you survived, solved, adapted, learned, rebuilt, endured. Every time you do something difficult, even if you stumble, even if you fail, even if it was messy, your brain stores evidence I handled that. And that becomes inner capital, quiet proof, a private archive of strength. That is why confident people don't need to shout. They don't need to dominate conversations. They don't need to convince anyone. Their confidence is not a performance. It is a history. That also explains why some people appear confident only until they are challenged. Their confidence is not built on evidence. It is built on illusion, on appearance, validation, or habit, not identity. You can always tell the difference. The ego says, nothing can touch me. Real confidence says, whatever touches me, I can handle. And that brings us to the core algorithm of unshakable confidence. Confidence equals self-trust in future situations because of evidence from past resilience. If you trust your ability to rebuild, you never fear losing. If you trust your ability to speak again, you never fear a mistake. If you trust your ability to stand back up, you never fear the fall. You do not need the world to guarantee safety when you are the safety mechanism. So how do we build that kind of confidence? Not by repeating affirmations in the mirror, not by pretending to be fearless, not by deleting insecurity, but by accumulating proof of self-capability. Small decisions where you acted even when uncertain. Moments you did not run from discomfort. Challenges you faced without collapsing. Skills you developed without applause. Clarity you found without encouragement. Confidence grows in silence first, long before it becomes visible. And here is the part nobody tells you. You do not need to feel confident to act. You need to act to become confident. Action creates evidence. Evidence builds identity. Identity becomes confidence. That is the loop. Not motivation action, but action evidence, identity confidence. You don't wait for confidence. You generate it. And the moment you understand that, you stop saying I'm not confident enough yet and start saying I'm building the version of me who will be. The people you admire are not confident because they were born that way. They are confident because they have more references of self-trust than you do. Not better genetics, not better luck, not a smoother life. The difference between you and them is not potential, but proof, and proof is something you can build, one difficult decision at a time, One uncomfortable conversation at a time. One moment of emotional self-control at a time. One promise to yourself, kept instead of abandoned. Every time you keep your word to yourself, your brain updates your identity. I can rely on me. Once that becomes true, the world can shake. But you do not. Because real confidence is not, they will approve of me. Real confidence is, I don't need them to approve of me in order to stay myself. And that brings us back to communication. Why is confidence so critical? Because people don't listen to the smartest voice. They listen to the most certain voice. Certainty is contagious. Self-trust is audible. And the nervous system of the listener responds to the nervous system of the speaker long before it responds to the meaning of the words. You don't speak to transfer information. You speak to transfer state. And only a regulated, grounded, self-trusting mind can regulate, ground, and influence others. We have now built the inner architecture authority. Presence, silence, persuasion, calibration, confidence. But there is one more battlefield, the space where communication often collapses: pressure, crisis, confrontation. Anyone can sound confident when things are calm. Anyone can communicate well when everyone agrees. But the true measure of communication mastery is not how you speak when everything is easy. It is how you hold yourself when the room is tense. The stakes are real, and emotions are running high. Crisis communication is not just about the right words. It is about nervous system dominance. Because in moments of pressure, the brain does not listen to language first. It listens to stability. When people are angry, afraid, stressed, embarrassed, confused, or under attack, their logical brain goes offline. Their emotional brain takes over. And in that moment, the most influential person in the room is not the one with the best argument, but the one who stays regulated. That is the first rule of crisis communication. Control the temperature before you control the message. If you react, you lose frame. If you defend, you lose position. If you try to force logic on someone who is in an emotional state, your logic becomes noise. So the real challenge in a high-pressure interaction is not, what should I say, but can I stay centered while others lose center? Because the nervous system speaks louder than sentences. Calmness is contagious. So is panic. If you want your voice to matter during conflict, escalation, or chaos, you must become the emotional anchor in the space. Think of a pilot in turbulence. The plane shakes. Alarms beep. Passengers panic, but the pilot's voice stays slow, clear, grounded, not because the situation isn't serious, but because panic does not solve the problem. That same principle applies in every kind of crisis communication. A heated negotiation, a relationship argument, a boardroom clash, a public mistake, a customer meltdown, a team under pressure. The person who regulates first leads first. But regulation is not suppression. It is control with clarity. It is the ability to separate the event from your identity. You do not need to win the moment. You need to own yourself in the moment. From there, language becomes a tool, not a reaction. So how do strong communicators speak during crisis? They do three things instinctively. They slow down. They lower their tone. They remove emotional noise from their words. When others get faster, they get slower. When others raise their voice, they lower theirs. When others flood with emotion, they respond with structure. Because structure repairs chaos. Listen to how different it sounds. Weak crisis response. Wait. No. That's not what I meant. You're misunderstanding me. Just calm down. Fast. Reactive. Defensive. It adds fuel. Strong crisis response. I hear that you're upset. Let's slow this down for a moment. What's the real issue underneath this centered? Acknowledging. Directional. It creates space. Crisis communication is not about being right. It is about restoring clarity. And clarity begins with validation, not argument. When someone feels unseen, disrespected, or threatened, they don't care about your explanation. They care about being acknowledged first. Not "you're right, but I understand what's happening inside you." That sentence alone lowers the psychological fire. Once emotion drop, the logical brain reactivates. Only then can information land. This is why the line "I get why you feel that way" is more effective than "let me explain." Because humans don't calm down when they receive logic. They calm down when they feel recognized. And only then does influence return. But there is a deeper layer most people never master. In a crisis, power shifts. Whoever makes emotional reactions about themselves loses status. Whoever stays purpose-centered keeps authority. You lose power when you defend your ego. You gain power when you protect the mission. So instead of "this makes me look bad," say, "What matters now is fixing this." Not assigning blame. Instead of "I didn't do anything wrong," say, "Let's solve the problem first. We can review responsibility later." Instead of "You're overreacting," say, "I want to understand what created this reaction so we can move forward." That is not weakness. That is strategic composure. The most powerful person in a crisis is never the loudest. It is the one who keeps the frame, holds emotional gravity, and slows the scene back into clarity. Because crisis is not about words. Crisis is about state transfer. If you stay grounded, others follow your state. If you join their panic, you lose leadership instantly. So the real question is, can you stay internal while the room goes external? Can you respond instead of react? Can you protect the direction instead of your image? That ability is the difference between someone who collapses in conflict, someone who becomes the one people trust during chaos. The next chapter is the final evolution of this skill, not just controlling yourself, not just controlling the room, but controlling the narrative. Because there is one more level above communication, persuasion, and crisis, handling the power to shape meaning. And that is where we go next. Charisma is not magic. It is not a gift given to a few lucky people at birth. It is not about being the loudest person in the room, the most good-looking, the most extroverted, or the most entertaining. Real charisma is not performance. It is presence engineered with intention. The mistake people make is thinking charisma is something you do. No, charisma is something people feel when they are around you. It is the emotional effect your presence creates in the nervous system of others. Some people make you feel tense. Some people make you feel smaller. Some people drain the room. And then there are those rare people who make everything feel lighter, clearer, more alive, more possible simply by being there. That is charisma. And like every form of human influence, it has patterns repeatable, learnable, testable patterns. Once you understand them, charisma stops being a mystery and becomes a skill set. At the core of charisma are 8 ingredients, not tricks, not tactics, but internal signals that people pick up unconsciously when you speak. when you listen, when you enter a space, even when you say nothing. The first is presence. Charisma begins when you stop being split between past, future, and overthinking and arrive fully in the moment. People can feel when you are with them, and they can feel when you are half somewhere else. Presence is the opposite of trying to impress. It is the art of making this moment the only moment. The second is curiosity. Charismatic people are not interesting because they talk a lot. They are interesting because they are interested. Curiosity removes social tension. It turns communication from performance into exploration. The person who makes others feel seen, understood, heard, always becomes magnetic. The third is attunement, the ability to read the emotional frequency of the person in front of you and match it before you guide it. You cannot lift someone to a higher state until you signal, "I understand where you are now." Attunement is what makes people trust you without knowing why. The fourth is the ability to modulate energy, sometimes grounded and still, sometimes brighter and expansive. Charisma is not one energy. It is range. The person who is always intense becomes exhausting. The person who is always calm becomes invisible. Charisma is the ability to shift energy on purpose, not by accident. The fifth is storytelling. Not just telling stories, but creating inner images through words. The brain doesn't remember information. It remembers meaning. It remembers scenes, metaphors, human moments. A good story bypasses logic and speaks straight to the emotional brain. Charisma lives in imagery. The sixth is something few people ever master: calibrated vulnerability. Not oversharing, not trying to be pitied, but revealing just enough truth, just enough humanity to show you are not a mask, you are a person. Power without humanity feels cold. Humanity without power feels weak. Calibrated vulnerability is the bridge. The seventh is positive assumption, the belief that others are already open to you, already interested, already willing. When you approach someone as if they are safe, you make them feel safe. When you expect rejection, your energy telegraphs fear. Charisma begins with assuming connection, not negotiating for it. And finally, the eighth element: recognition, the ability to make someone feel like they exist, not just heard, gut felt, not just acknowledged, but validated. People don't remember what you said. They remember how they felt in your presence. And nothing makes a person feel more alive than the experience of being truly recognized. When these 8 elements merge, charisma stops being something you try to do. It becomes something others experience without effort. And that is the secret most people never understand. Charisma is not something you push outward. It is something people are pulled into. The charismatic person does not dominate attention. They invite it. They do not chase connection. They create space where connection happens on its own. And this brings us to the final truth of this entire audiobook. Influence is not about speaking better. It is about being someone whose presence changes the emotional state of others. Authority makes people respect you. Persuasion makes people agree with you. Charisma makes people want to be near you. Authority gets silence. Persuasion gets compliance. Charisma gets loyalty. One earns the mind. One wins the decision. One leaves a mark. The most powerful communicators in the world do not live in one category. They integrate all 3. The authority of someone who cannot be ignored. The persuasion of someone who can move decisions. The charisma of someone who makes others feel expanded. That is the real end point of communication mastery. Not louder speaking. Not robotic confidence. Not manipulation disguised as strategy, but presence that speaks without speaking, identity that leads without demanding, and impact that lasts long after the words are gone. If you have listened carefully, you now carry every layer. How to speak with power, how to shape perception, how to create respect without dominance, how to use silence as leverage, how to persuade without pressure, how to read the room without losing yourself, how to build confidence that cannot collapse, how to stay in command during chaos, how to create emotional gravity through charisma, not a set of tricks, not a collection of quotes, but a system. From this point forward, communication is no longer something that happens to you. It is something you engineer. Now the question is no longer, how do I speak so they listen, but what version of me do I activate for this moment? That is the final unlock. Not just learning what to say, but becoming someone the world cannot ignore. You've just traveled through 10 chapters, 10 layers of communication, 10 thresholds that most people never cross, even after a lifetime of talking, explaining, reacting, defending, and hoping to be heard. If you've made it this far, you are no longer someone who is simply looking for tips or tricks. You are someone who has begun the deeper work, not learning how to speak more, but learning how to speak with weight, how to shape the atmosphere around you instead of blending into it. Because communication was never just about expression, it has always been about presence, about the way your voice rearranges the energy of a room, about the way silence becomes an extension of your identity, about the way people lean in, not because you demanded attention, but because your inner world earned it. Across this journey, you've made a shift from talking to be noticed, to speaking to direct attention, from reacting to the world to designing your impact on it, from hoping people will listen to becoming the kind of person people want to listen to. You've learned to hold authority without aggression, to persuade without pressure, to use silence as a form of power, not fear, to stay centered when emotion tries to pull you off balance, to build confidence that doesn't require applause, to shape meaning instead of chasing approval, and finally, to stand in a room, not as a voice competing for space, but as a presence that shapes the space itself. But here is the part most people never realize. Nothing you learned here is meant to turn you into someone else. It is meant to reveal the version of you the world has never fully met, the grounded one, the intentional one, the one who does not need noise to signify value. So before this chapter closes, I want to invite you to leave one mark behind, not for me, but for yourself. In the comments, write just one sentence. From now on, I will communicate as someone whose words have weight, not as a performance, not as a promise to me, but as a declaration to the person you are becoming. Because from this moment forward, every interaction is no longer random. Every room you enter becomes a test of presence. Every sentence you speak becomes a signal of identity. And every silence you hold becomes a reminder that real power does not need to rush to prove itself. If you choose to continue this journey, you already know where to return. This is not just a channel. It is a training ground for those who influence without shouting, who lead without begging, who speak less but leave more behind. Until our next chapter together, speak with intent. Hold your center and let your presence do the first half of the talking. The world doesn't need more voices. It needs more voices that matter.